Hey, welcome to the shop. This video tells the story about a motorcycle I had that some people might say was cursed. I don't think of it that way because I'm not superstitious, and chalking up misfortune to some higher power might understate the lessons we can learn from human error. Plus, I don't want to make light of this subject because it would be insensitive to the people involved. At the center of this story is a 1982 Honda 750 Nighthawk. The 750 Nighthawk was a double overhead cam descendant of the 1970s Honda single overhead cam 754. The 1982 model was a logical step between the late 1970s 750K and the more sporty Nighthawk S that came out in 1984. Like their predecessors, the Nighthawks were solid bikes, reliable, smooth, and reasonably powerful for the day. The Nighthawk that is the main character of our story entered my life in the fall of 1983. My daily rider at the time was a 1982 Yamaha XT200, which was a wonderful little four-stroke trail bike. My motorcycling friends were riding street bikes, so I wasn't able to run with them most of the time, and I was looking to get a bigger bike. I had a 1978 Yamaha 750 Special before the XT, and I knew what I was missing. I was chatting about bikes with a high school math classmate one day, and he mentioned that he had this Nighthawk. He offered to trade me even for the XT200. Obviously, a 750 Nighthawk should be worth much more than an XT200 of the same year, but this Nighthawk had been in an accident. My classmate had rear-ended a car with this bike. He openly blamed himself for the accident, saying he was distracted and riding too fast. Thankfully, he wasn't seriously injured, but the Nighthawk wasn't so lucky. A fork tube was bent, some plastic was broken, the headlight bucket and gauge cluster housing were damaged, along with some other small scrapes and bruises. But I didn't see signs of a bent frame, and it was otherwise very nice, with only a few thousand kilometers on the clock. I could see a lot of potential in this bike, so I made the trade. I repaired it over the following winter, and it ended up costing me less than I expected. A machine shop was able to straighten the fork tube, and I found a few good parts like a gauge cluster housing and a headlight bucket from a salvage yard. Other parts just needed straightening and or repainting. There were a few small scars, such as a couple of broken engine cooling fins that I wasn't able to fix. But overall, it turned out to be a very nice bike. By spring, I had myself a reliable daily rider, and I was able to keep up with my friends once more. I rode this Nighthawk for a year or so, and it gave me many reliable miles of smiles. It had an upright riding position with a wide, comfortable seat, making it a mile muncher for longer trips, of which I took quite a few. I have nothing but fond memories of my time with this bike. But life takes turns, and in my case, I was heading for university in the fall of 1985. I knew the day was soon coming that I'd have to set aside my love for motorcycles, because I'd need winter transportation, and as a university student, I'd barely be able to afford one vehicle. And that leads to the first coincidence of this story. Again, in a math class, in late spring of 1985, I was chatting with a guy who had a car and was looking for a bike. His car was a 1980 Mercury Cougar XR7, and he offered to trade me even for the Nighthawk. Like the last trade, this one might not sound fair. But also like the last trade, the Cougar had been in an accident. My classmate sideswiped a guardrail with it, leaving quite a few dents on one side, as well as some broken or missing trim pieces. But he was still driving it, and it worked fine, so I knew the damage was only cosmetic, and I made the trade. I fixed up the Cougar as much as I could afford and repainted it, and then I had a decent car for school. It gave me several years of reliable all-season transportation, so I was thankful to have it. As for the guy who got the Nighthawk from me, his story also took a turn that summer. This was his first street bike, and he was no more careful with it than he was with that Cougar. That combination resulted in him driving the bike under the trailer of a semi-truck that was turning across the street in front of him. He survived, but his injuries made him a paraplegic, and he's been confined to a wheelchair ever since. I was sickened by the news of this accident. I was sad for him, and I wish to this day that I had never let him have that bike. But he's a sensible guy who took it all admirably well and admitted the accident was his fault. He said he was going too fast and that he was paying more attention to his buddies in the car behind him than he was to the road ahead. I haven't stayed in touch with him over the years, but I've heard through common friends that he's been living a happy, fulfilling life, which, knowing his character, doesn't surprise me. And here's the other coincidence of this story. That Nighthawk's first accident happened on Roby Street in Truro, a town in Nova Scotia, Canada. 2 years on, the bike's second and final accident happened just a few blocks away on the same street. I related this story to someone years later, and they said it seemed like that Nighthawk was cursed. As I said, I don't buy into that, and I prefer to focus on the lessons this bike's storied life tells us. In reality, these were two accidents where an inexperienced biker was riding too fast and distracted. We can't blame the bike for any of that. The second accident was the end of the road for that Nighthawk, and it was written off. So even if there was a curse, it didn't claim any more victims. In any case, that bike figured prominently in the lives of several people, and what really matters is the valuable lessons of its legacy. It's a jungle out here, and motorcycling exposes us to plenty of danger from other drivers without adding our own risk. No matter how much experience you have or what bike you're riding, keep a laser-like focus on where you're going, avoid distractions, and ride at a sensible speed. It'll lessen the likelihood that your bike is cursed. Thanks for watching.